Michael Jordan wasn't just ruthless on the court, he carried that same energy into real life. From clowning Chamilillionaire so hard he stopped being a fan.
I had heard so many rumors about people saying how Michael Jordan, how bad he was, so I was kind of disappointed.
To blackballing Isaiah Thomas from the Dream Team out of pure spite.
And then it actually just came out in the last year where he said, I'll play as long as Isaiah don't play.
And even humiliating a homeless man for fun. In this video, we're breaking down some of Michael Jordan's most savage off-court moments. And trust me, some of the stuff this dude did, you won't even believe it. The Chamilillionaire Incident. Picture this, you're Chamilillionaire, a successful rapper, Grammy winner, and lifelong basketball fan who grew up idolizing Michael Jordan. You've just attended a charity auction where you bid $7,000 for a Michael Jordan jersey, and now you're at Jordan's own party, surrounded by celebrities and athletes. You see your childhood hero taking pictures with other guests, and you think to yourself, this is my moment. Little did Chamilillionaire know that this encounter would become one of the most publicly discussed examples of Jordan's off-court behavior. The story, as Chamilillionaire himself recounted in painful detail, began innocently enough. The rapper approached Jordan at what was supposed to be a celebratory event, politely asking for a photograph. But what happened next would shatter any illusions about meeting your heroes.
He said, oh, hell nah, man, I ain't taking no pictures of no.
The words hung in the air like a slap across the face. Chamilillionaire, stunned by the harsh rejection and the derogatory language, initially thought Jordan hadn't heard him properly. But what came next was even worse.
And then he goes, you know what? I tell you what, you pay $15,000 right now for a jersey from me and I'll take a picture with you.
The emotional impact on Chamilillionaire was profound and lasting. What makes this incident particularly heartbreaking is understanding the context of Chamillionaire's fandom. This wasn't just any celebrity encounter. This was a man meeting his childhood idol, someone he had literally paused video games to admire, someone whose every dunk and crossover he had memorized. The psychological impact of such a crushing disappointment from a figure you've idolized since childhood cannot be overstated. The story doesn't end there.
So then when I finally saw him, he was like that to me. So I was like, wow. And then I had heard so many rumors about people saying how Michael Jordan, how bad he was. So I was kind of disappointed.
This incident, as reported by Bleacher Report, became emblematic of Jordan's alleged pattern of dismissive behavior toward fans. The story went viral not just because of the celebrity involved, but because it confirmed what many had suspected about Jordan's off-court personality. What's particularly striking about this encounter is how it reveals Jordan's apparent inability to separate his competitive persona from basic human interactions. The aftermath was equally telling.
My security called me and was like, yo, Nike brand Jordan wants to talk to you because they want to apologize. They were trying to send me Nike Jordans and all this stuff.
The fact that Nike felt compelled to reach out and apologize speaks volumes about the severity of the incident and its potential impact on Jordan's brand. It also suggests that this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a pattern that even his corporate partners were concerned about. The homeless man and Charles Barkley. One of the most troubling stories about Michael Jordan's character involves an incident with his close friend Charles Barkley that reveals a concerning attitude toward those less fortunate. The story, while lacking primary source verification, has become part of the Jordan mythology because it aligns so perfectly with other documented examples of his behavior.
Is it true that when you're
No, I was give a homeless guy some money one night, and he smacks my hand.
Why?
And he says, if he can say, do you have any spare change? He can say, welcome to McDonald's, can I help you, please?
The image this story paints is deeply troubling. Jordan physically preventing his friend from performing an act of kindness, while simultaneously expressing a callous disregard for the struggles of homelessness. The implication that anyone capable of asking for help should instead be working at McDonald's reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of the complex factors that contribute to homelessness. What makes this incident particularly disturbing is not just Jordan's attitude toward the homeless person, but his willingness to physically interfere with Barkley's charitable impulse. This suggests a man so committed to his worldview that he was willing to impose it on others, even when it meant preventing acts of compassion. The anecdote, as shared on social media, has been cited in numerous discussions about Jordan's character, despite its unverified nature. The story has persisted because it fits a pattern of behavior that many find troubling: a lack of empathy for those in difficult circumstances and a tendency to view every situation through the lens of personal responsibility without considering systemic factors. The incident also highlights the contrast between Jordan and Barkley's approaches to charitable giving. While Barkley was moved to help someone in need, Jordan saw the situation as an opportunity to deliver a harsh lesson about work ethic and personal responsibility. This fundamental difference in perspective reveals something significant about their respective characters. The Lavel Crawford confrontation. Comedy and sports have always had a complicated relationship, with comedians often using athletes as material for their routines. Most athletes understand that. Being in the public eye makes them fair game for jokes and good-natured ribbing. However, Michael Jordan's encounter with comedian Lavel Crawford revealed a side of his personality that many found troubling, an apparent inability to handle even mild criticism or jokes about his performance. The incident occurred when Crawford, a successful comedian known for his appearances on shows like Breaking Bad and his stand-up specials, made some jokes about Jordan during a comedy routine. The jokes weren't particularly harsh or personal. They were typical sports-related comedy that poked fun at Jordan's brief baseball career and the way people treated him with kid gloves.
Michael Jordan, I talked about Michael Jordan playing baseball. He was at Antoine Walker's thing he have every year in Chicago, and he was playing baseball, and I was saying, yeah, kissing his because he the legend. He a legend in basketball. He ain't a legend in softball. They kept on rolling the ball. They let him get a home run just because he was Michael Jordan. I said, man, out, man. He ain't that damn good.
Right.
He got mad at me. I said, he can't even hit the ball. I was giving him the business.
Right.
Crawford's comedy was typical of what you'd expect from a professional comedian observing a celebrity sporting event. He was pointing out what he saw as preferential treatment and making jokes about it. This kind of material is standard fare in comedy clubs across the country, and most public figures understand that being joked about comes with the territory of fame. But Jordan's reaction was far from typical.
I said, Mr. Jordan, can I get a picture with you? He said, he grabbed me like this. Let me tell you something, I'll take a picture with you, but you better stop talking about me. and after that, the whole weekend, that baby come over and hang out with him.
The physical nature of Jordan's response, grabbing Crawford while delivering what was essentially a threat, was particularly concerning. This wasn't just verbal disapproval. It was an intimidating physical gesture designed to make Crawford understand that his jokes weren't appreciated and wouldn't be tolerated. What makes this incident particularly troubling is the disproportion between Crawford's mild comedy and Jordan's aggressive response. Crawford wasn't attacking Jordan personally or saying anything that could be considered truly offensive. He was simply doing what comedians do, observing behavior and making jokes about it. Jordan's reaction suggested an extremely thin skin and an inability to laugh at himself. The aftermath of the incident was equally telling.
And after that, the whole weekend, that baby come over and hang out with him, gave me cigars and everything. And Charles Oakley, he fell in love.
The fact that Jordan then insisted Crawford spend the weekend with him suggests a complex psychology. It was as if Jordan needed to control the narrative and ensure that Crawford understood who was in charge. This encounter, as reported in various sources, highlights Jordan's sensitivity to criticism, even when it comes in the form of mild comedy. Most public figures understand that being joked about is part of the price of fame, but Jordan's reaction suggested that he took even gentle ribbing as a personal attack that required a response. The Isaiah Thomas exclusion. Perhaps no single incident better illustrates Michael Jordan's capacity for pettiness and vindictiveness than his role in excluding Isaiah Thomas from the 1992 United States Olympic Dream Team. This wasn't just a case of personal preference or competitive rivalry. It was a deliberate use of his influence and power to deny a Hall of Fame player what should have been the pinnacle of his international basketball career. The backstory is crucial to understanding the full scope of Jordan's actions. The Detroit Pistons, led by Thomas, had been the Chicago Bulls' primary obstacle to championship success in the late 1980s and early 1990s. The Pistons employed a physical, aggressive style of play that was designed to intimidate and frustrate their opponents, particularly Jordan. This strategy, while effective, created lasting animosity between the teams. The breaking point came in the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals when the Bulls finally overcame the Pistons. In a moment that would define the rivalry, the Pistons walked off the court before the game ended, refusing to shake hands with the Bulls. For Jordan, this was apparently the final straw in what had become a deeply personal feud.
They asked Michael Jordan, did he have anything to do with it? And then it actually just came out in the last year where he said, I'll play as long as Isaiah don't play.
Thank you.
So,
and then you got to have him. If you going overseas, you got to take the biggest guy.
This ultimatum was extraordinary in its scope and implications. Jordan wasn't just expressing a preference, he was leveraging his status as the team's biggest star to dictate roster decisions. The message was clear. If the selection committee wanted Michael Jordan on the team, they would have to exclude Isaiah Thomas.
Whoever Michael didn't want on the team wasn't going to be on the team.
we're not going to be on the team.
The decision to exclude Thomas was particularly controversial because of his qualifications. Thomas was a two-time NBA champion, multiple-time All-Star, and Finals MVP. By any objective measure, he belonged on a team assembled to represent the best of American basketball. His exclusion was based purely on Jordan's personal animosity, not on basketball merit. The incident reveals something troubling about Jordan's character and his approach to relationships. Rather than letting his on-court success speak for itself, he felt compelled to ensure that his rival was punished, even in context completely removed from their original competition. This wasn't about basketball excellence. It was about personal retribution. Many viewed Jordan's actions as an abuse of power that tarnished his legacy off the court. The author of that piece went so far as to call it evidence of Jordan being the most disrespectful and overrated man in NBA history, highlighting how this incident colored perceptions of his entire career. The long-term implications of this decision extended far beyond the 1992 Olympics. Thomas's exclusion became a defining moment in NBA history, one that fans and analysts continue to debate decades later. It raised questions about whether personal conflict should ever override merit-based selection for national teams, and whether any individual player should have the power to dictate roster decisions. For basketball fans, the exclusion of Thomas represented a missed opportunity to see one of the game's greatest point guards compete alongside other legends. The Dream Team was already historically significant, but it could have been even more complete with Thomas's inclusion. His absence was a constant reminder of how personal conflicts could diminish collective achievements. The tipping scandal. In the world of professional athletics, where multi-million-dollar contracts are commonplace, the way athletes treat service workers often reveals more about their character than any on-court performance ever could. Michael Jordan's reputation as a notoriously poor tipper became one of the most persistent and damaging aspects of his off-court legacy, creating situations so uncomfortable that teammates and friends regularly had to intervene to preserve their own dignity. According to accounts detailed in various sources, Jordan's tipping habits were so poor that they became a source of regular embarrassment for those around him. The stories that emerged painted a picture of a man who, despite his enormous wealth, was remarkably stingy when it came to acknowledging the service of others. One particularly telling incident involved a casino worker who received what was described as a minimal tip from Jordan, prompting other patrons to step in and cover the difference. This behavior was noted in a 2022 discussion where contributors described Jordan's frugality as a recurring issue in public settings like restaurants and casinos. What made these incidents particularly troubling wasn't just the poor tips themselves, but the ripple effect they created. Jordan's teammates and friends reportedly felt compelled to compensate for his stinginess, not out of obligation to him, but out of basic human decency toward the service workers who had been shortchanged. This created a pattern where Jordan's behavior became everyone else's problem to solve. From the perspective of Jordan's peers, these incidents were deeply embarrassing. Imagine being out for dinner with colleagues and having to quietly compensate for your friend's poor behavior, knowing that the entire restaurant staff was watching and judging. The fact that this became a recurring issue suggests that Jordan either didn't understand the impact of his behavior or simply didn't care about the discomfort he was causing others. The tipping issue also revealed something troubling about Jordan's relationship with money and status. While he was reportedly extremely particular about his own compensation and business deals, he seemed to have little regard for ensuring that others were fairly compensated for their work. This double standard suggested a worldview where his own financial interests were paramount, while the financial needs of others were irrelevant. Cheating at cards. Perhaps no story better illustrates Michael Jordan's pathological need to win than his attempt to cheat during a casual card game at his North Carolina teammate Buzz Peterson's family home. This wasn't a high-stakes poker game in a casino or a competitive match with money on the line. This was a friendly family gathering where Jordan tried to gain an unfair advantage against Peterson's elderly mother. As detailed in the Bleacher Report account, the incident was recounted by Peterson himself and later documented by author Chuck Klosterman. The setting was as innocent as it gets, a casual card game in a family home, the kind of low-key social interaction that most people would approach with relaxation and good humor. But for Jordan, even this benign family activity became a competition that he apparently felt compelled to manipulate. The fact that no money was at stake makes his behavior all the more troubling. This wasn't about financial gain or professional advancement. It was about the pure, unadulterated need to win at any cost, even if it meant compromising his integrity in the most trivial of circumstances. What makes this incident particularly telling is that it occurred in a setting where Jordan had nothing to prove and everything to lose. He was already established as one of the greatest basketball players of all time, yet he felt compelled to cheat in a meaningless card game. This suggests that his need to dominate wasn't strategic or professional, it was compulsive and all-consuming. This incident must have been deeply uncomfortable for Buzz Peterson. Not only was his friend and teammate cheating against his mother, but he was put in the position of having to address the behavior without creating a scene that would embarrass his family or damage his relationship with Jordan. The incident has often been cited as either charming evidence of Jordan's relentless drive or troubling proof of his willingness to cross ethical lines for trivial victories. The interpretation largely depends on whether you view Jordan's competitiveness as an admirable trait that occasionally went too far or as a character flaw that manifested in inappropriate ways. The Lagor Country Club Dress Code Incident. Golf was one of Michael Jordan's greatest passions outside of basketball, and his love for the game was well documented throughout his career and into retirement. But his relationship with golf courses and country clubs wasn't always smooth, particularly when it came to following rules that he apparently felt didn't apply to him. The incident at Lagor Country Club in Miami stands as a perfect example of how Jordan's sense of entitlement could override basic courtesy and respect for established norms. According to the report by Bleacher Report, Jordan was asked to change his attire to comply with the club's dress code. This wasn't an unusual request. Most private country clubs have specific dress codes that all members and guests are expected to follow, regardless of their fame or status. But Jordan's response was telling. He arrogantly refused to comply with the request, reportedly ignoring club officials even when they approached him on the 12th hole of the golf course. This wasn't a case of misunderstanding the rules or being unaware of the dress code. It was a deliberate decision to disregard the club's policies because he apparently felt they didn't apply to him. The incident escalated to the point where Jordan was ultimately barred from the club, effectively limiting his access to what had been one of his favorite golf destinations. This consequence suggests that the club's officials felt his behavior was serious enough to warrant permanent exclusion, despite the potential negative publicity that might come from banning one of the world's most famous athletes. What makes this incident particularly troubling is what it reveals about Jordan's attitude toward rules and authority. Private clubs have dress codes for reasons that go beyond mere tradition. They're part of maintaining a certain atmosphere and showing respect for the institution and other members. By refusing to comply, Jordan was essentially saying that his personal preferences were more important than the club's policies and the comfort of other members. The timing of the confrontation on the 12th hole suggests that this wasn't a misunderstanding that could be quickly resolved. Jordan had presumably been made aware of the dress code issue earlier in his round, yet he chose to continue playing rather than addressing the problem. This shows a level of defiance that goes beyond simple stubbornness. The fact that they ultimately chose to ban Jordan suggests that they felt his behavior was so disrespectful that it warranted extreme measures. This wasn't just about clothing. It was about respect for the institution and consideration for other members who were expected to follow the same rules. The Cigar Bar Incident. Do you know who I am? Few phrases reveal entitlement quite like, "Do you know who I am?" It's the battle cry of celebrities who believe their fame should grant them special privileges, exempting them from the rules that govern ordinary people. When Michael Jordan allegedly uttered these words in response to being asked to extinguish his cigar in a non-smoking establishment, it became another entry in the growing catalog of incidents that painted him as someone who believed his celebrity status placed him above common courtesy and basic rules. According to a Reddit thread from 2013, the story was recounted by someone claiming to be Jordan's brother, who worked as a bartender. The incident allegedly occurred when Jordan lit a cigar in a bar, and when politely asked to extinguish it, responded with the classic entitled celebrity response, "Do you know who I am?" While the story's veracity is questionable due to its source, it aligns perfectly with other documented examples of Jordan's behavior when confronted with rules or requests that didn't suit his preferences. The incident represents a pattern of behavior where Jordan's fame became a shield that he used to avoid the normal social contracts that govern civil society. What makes incidents like this particularly galling is the dismissive attitude towards service workers, who are simply trying to do their jobs. The bartender or establishment employee who asked Jordan to extinguish his cigar wasn't being unreasonable. They were likely enforcing health regulations, fire codes, or establishment policies that applied to everyone. Jordan's response essentially communicated that he believed his celebrity status exempted him from these basic requirements. The story has persisted in online discussions about Jordan's character precisely because it fits the pattern that many people have observed. It's not necessarily that this specific incident is definitely true, but rather that it's completely believable given other documented examples of Jordan's behavior in similar situations. The Thewami Brown abuse, leadership through humiliation. If Michael Jordan's exclusion of Isaiah Thomas from the Dream Team showed his capacity for external vindictiveness, his treatment of Thewami Brown during his tenure as general manager of the Washington Wizards revealed something even more troubling: his willingness to psychologically abuse young players under his authority. This wasn't rivalry between equals or competition between superstars. This was a case of someone in a position of power using that authority to humiliate and demean a teenager who was trying to establish himself in professional basketball. When Jordan drafted Thewami Brown first overall in the 2001 NBA draft, it was seen as a bold move that would either revolutionize the game or prove to be a spectacular failure. Brown was just 19 years old, making the jump directly from high school to the NBA at a time when such transitions were becoming more common, but were still fraught with challenges. What should have been a mentoring relationship between a legendary player and a promising young talent instead became a masterclass in how power can corrupt even the most successful individuals. According to reports from the Washington Post, as detailed by Sportskeeda, Jordan's treatment of Brown was characterized by verbal abuse that went far beyond tough coaching or high standards. The reports described Jordan using expletives and homophobic remarks that reduced Brown to tears in front of his teammates, a level of humiliation that would be unacceptable in any professional environment, let alone one involving a teenager trying to establish himself in his chosen career. The psychological impact of this treatment on Brown cannot be overstated. Imagine being 19 years old, thrust into the spotlight as the #1 draft pick, and instead of receiving guidance and support from one of the game's greatest players, you're subjected to public humiliation and verbal assault. The damage to Brown's confidence and development was immediate and lasting, contributing to what many would later characterize as an underwhelming career relative to his draft position. What makes Jordan's behavior particularly inexcusable is the power dynamic involved. As general manager, Jordan held Brown's career in his hands. The young player couldn't simply walk away or fight back without risking his professional future. This created a situation where Jordan could abuse his authority with impunity, knowing that Brown had little recourse but to endure the treatment. The incident reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of leadership and mentorship on Jordan's part. Throughout his playing career, he had been known for pushing teammates hard and demanding excellence, but there's a crucial difference between high standards and abuse. Effective leadership requires building people up while challenging them to improve, not tearing them down through humiliation and personal attacks. The use of slurs was particularly troubling, as it suggested that Jordan's abuse wasn't just about basketball performance, but involved attacking Brown's identity and dignity as a person. This kind of language creates a hostile work environment and demonstrates a complete lack of respect for basic human dignity. In any other professional context, such behavior would likely result in immediate termination and potential legal consequences. What's particularly tragic about this situation is how preventable it was. Jordan had the opportunity to be a positive influence in a young player's life, to use his experience and knowledge to help Brown develop both as a player and as a person. Instead, he chose to use his position to inflict psychological damage that would follow Brown throughout his career. The long-term consequences of Jordan's treatment extended beyond Brown himself. Other young players watching the situation undoubtedly learned that being drafted by Jordan's organization could mean subjecting themselves to abuse rather than receiving mentorship. This kind of reputation makes it difficult to attract and develop young talent, ultimately harming the organization's long-term prospects. The incident also damaged Jordan's reputation as a leader and mentor. While his playing career had established him as someone who could elevate his teammates' performance, his treatment of Brown suggested that his leadership style was based more on intimidation and fear than on genuine development and support. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to watch another fascinating video like this, click on one of the boxes on your screen right now.